What's the craziest crime you or somebody in your family has committed? My sister-in-law worked on a ski hill. One week there was a promotion by a company where they would blow up big inflatables like the big gorillas you see in car lots. She had seen them blow up and deflate them for days, so she knew what the deflated ones looked like. One day she was leaving work and one of these deflated mascot thingies was right behind her car. My sister-in-law has never stolen anything in her life, but at that moment, she decided out of the blue that she wanted that blow up. She plopped it in the back and drove home. When I came to visit a few weeks later, she was freaking out about it. She asked me if I wanted it just to get the evidence out of her house. That's the story of how I came to own a 2-story high inflatable cow. Of all the things to randomly steal as your first crime ever or whatever, a big 2-story tall inflatable cow? Yeah, I get it. Story 2. My dad's older brother came home from the war in Vietnam to find out that his wife had been cheating on him with his best friend. He locked them both in the friend's house and burned it down with them in it. He held the firefighters off with a rifle until he was sure they couldn't be saved. Then he shot himself. This was before I was born, but I've seen some newspaper clippings about it. Edit. Several people asked how he kept them in the house alone. I asked my mother about it and she said that he locked them together in a small bedroom closet and barricaded the door from the outside so they couldn't get out. This was in the 70s in New Orleans. I'm not going to give more info as it would be easy to tie back to me, same last name, or his daughter who was a little under 2 years old at the time, and I don't want that. So going from stealing a big cow to arson, double homicide, and ending yourself, oh my. This was a big jump, for sure. Also an absolutely insane story. Story 3. It's not a bad crime or anything, but it was illegal at the time. So in Germany, up until a few years ago, we still had a general draft for the army. And a generation ago, it was very hard to get out of it. My uncle was a hardcore pacifist, so going to the army wasn't an option for him. But being accepted as a conscientious objector at that time basically required you to be a devout Christian and use the Bible as an argument for why you couldn't end another human. My uncle was also atheist. He couldn't realistically object. He didn't want to go to the army, but didn't want to go to jail too. So he waited. He got sent his draft notice, passed the physical, and got a letter telling him to report to X company under Sergeant Y. He wrote back a reply on rose-colored paper scented with perfume about how much he was looking forward to serving under the strong leadership of Y, promising to obey every one of his orders, and that he can't wait to experience life in the barracks together with so many strong and muscular men. He was declared unfit for service shortly after. As far as I'm concerned, using their own homophobia against them is perfectly fair play. Well done, OP's uncle. Story 4. My dad, when he was much younger and infinitely more stupid, regularly used to drink and drive with his friends. It was the early 70s and no one really cared. To hear him speak about it now, he can't believe how stupid he was. One night he and his friend were out drinking. They heard there was a party going on at a pub across town and decided to head over. On the way, they go past a large club with a queue of people waiting to go in. My dad decides to show off a bit and pulls a skid. He miscalculated, hit a curb, and flipped the car, sliding down the road on his roof. The car stops, they get out and leg it, to the cheers of the people in the queue. They get the bus back home and immediately call the police to report the car as stolen. The police knew what happened but couldn't prove anything. Story 5. Cousin got busted robbing a bank, got sentenced to jail, proceeded to break out of jail with his cellmate and went on the run. Fast forward a few months and he's living in a hotel room with his cellmate. Cellmate orders pizza to the room, bad idea. Delivery guy recognized them and reported them to the police. They get arrested again, and shortly after, my cousin ended himself in prison. My cousin had a wife and a kid and got into a nasty drug habit. We don't bring him up anymore. Story 6. My grandfather's father was a mean, abusive, hateful drunk who would come home from working in the mines long enough to terrorize his children and impregnate his wife and then leave again for mine work. He tried to set the house on fire with wife and kids, 13 of them inside, twice. One day, my grandfather and a couple of his siblings were picking berries across the road from the house, and his drunk father started taking pot shots at them with a rifle. My grandpa, one brother, and his oldest sister took off running for the house with the agreement that the first one there would end him, their father. My grandpa's sister got there first and shot him to death. She was never charged with a crime due to her age and the fact that everyone knew my great-grandfather was a mean son of a gun, and he had it coming. This isn't a crime. It sounds a lot like self-defense to me. Sure, legally, I don't know if that holds up, because self-defense in the law is a whole other thing. But realistically, shout out to the people in charge for not charging that child with anything. Mean son of a gun is a very generous way to put it, OP. Story 7. When I was a young teen, the boys from the neighborhood and I loved playing pinball and video games at our local bowling alley. Problem was, we didn't have enough money to enjoy our new addiction. We decided to do something about that little problem. We started with a very rudimentary system. We actually scotch taped a piece of thread to a quarter and were able to fish it up and down a couple of times before the string would break, or the tape would give out. This worked fairly well, but we wanted and we needed more. Our next plan was a little more professional. We somehow concocted a scheme to make quarters. A few lessons in science class had actually stuck, and we realized that we needed something to fool the coin mechanism in the pinball machine into thinking that whatever it was we made our quarters with was an actual quarter. We ended up deciding that lead would be our material of choice. We used lead for a couple of reasons. One of the guy's fathers was an avid hunter. He even reloaded his own shotgun shells. Because of this, he had a burner set up in his shop to melt down lead. Another reason is that lead is not magnetic. Science! We made a mold out of plaster and used the burner to melt lead to make our quarters, but where to get more lead? One of us came up with the brilliant thought that tire weights are made of lead. Carrying screwdrivers and pliers, we scoured the parking lots of shopping centers. We would wander through and drop down out of sight between cars. Using the tools we had brought, we would manage to get the tire weights off with a little trouble. We were in business. Our production line was soon up and running. We would melt lead, pour it into our mold, cool it, and then move on to finishing our new quarter. The finishing process was crude, but effective. We would snip off the burr where the lead was poured. We would then file down the edge, making sure it stayed mostly round. Using steel wool and a polishing cloth, we would then shine the quarters. Now came the trial run. We went to the bowling alley with a few quarters to see if our harebrained scheme would actually work. In they went, and the pinball machine lit up and was ready to be played. Success! We intensified our production, and soon we had a bunch of quarters. We were thrilled. We could play video games anytime we wanted. Every day after school, you'd find us at the bowling alley happily playing our games, but our downfall was soon to come. We never thought of the fact that someone might notice a bunch of fake quarters being used in the video games and pinball machines. Literally never even crossed our early teenage minds. We just knew we were having a blast. One fateful day, we went to the bowling alley as usual. We started playing games, and soon, some men approached us. They started questioning and accusing us. We were scared to death. One of the guys yelled, "Run!" and we took off as fast as we could. We made it to the doors and down the steps we went. We all lived in the same cul-de-sac, and that's the direction we were headed. Running as fast as we could, we briefly split up. The men that were chasing us only followed one of us kids. He made the colossal mistake of running straight to his house and through the front door. From there, our crime spree ended. A few days later, I was in class when I was called to the office. When I got there, my father was sitting with a man I had never seen before. He was wearing a black suit with a black tie. I had to go before the principal, my father, and a member of the United States Secret Service. Although they take the counterfeiting of US currency very seriously, they understood that it was just a bunch of knucklehead kids making quarters to play video games. He told me he was actually impressed with the quality of the quarters. He also said that they had recovered over $75 in fake quarters. We had made and used over 300. We had to make restitution for the money, and the charge was placed on our juvenile records. It was explained to us that if we kept our noses clean, the charge would be expunged. Luckily for me, I learned my lesson and stayed on the straight and narrow for the rest of my young adult life. And that, fellow Redditors, is how I was charged with counterfeiting US currency. If that doesn't define the meaning of a crazy crime, I don't know what would. I didn't even realize until OP said black suit and a black tie what was gonna happen. Like, yeah, that is counterfeiting currency. That's a big deal. I'm not a teenager anymore, and even I didn't pick up on that. Glad they seemed to have a good head on their shoulders about it, though, that it was just kids playing games. And yeah, it is kind of impressive. As far as stories go, OP, this one is a banger. Story 8. My husband's dad ended the guy who his then-girlfriend was cheating on him with. He was supposed to serve a life term, but got out because of a clerical error. He did manual labor on a local park, and apparently the guys who helped were supposed to get a reduced sentence. However, he wasn't supposed to. I think. My husband talked about it once. Also, my husband's half-brother, same murderous dad, ended his business partner. He would have gotten away with it. However, he moved the body when he found out construction was going to start in that spot. And what were they going to build there? A prison. He's currently serving a life sentence. My husband has never met his half-brother. He also has 2 half-sisters from the same dad who are law-abiding citizens. Story 9. My uncle was a small drug lord in Northern California in the 90s. He had a compound out in Gold Country, had to drive through 3 gates with guards to get to his house. I never questioned it as a kid. Just enjoyed heading up so I could fish in the stocked bass pond, which also had snapping turtles as a line of defense. He'd take me out shopping at the mall with a film canister full of coke that he would take hits off of occasionally, shadowed by some bodyguards. One time we were out for a ride in his Corvette going well over 100 and got tagged by highway patrol. He talked his way out of the ticket, told the officer he was showing off for his nephew and got carried away. The officer thought it was hilarious. He told me it was lucky, since he had a ton of illegal guns and drugs in the trunk, and would have made a run for it. He got arrested when I was 15. It was a full-blown feds descending upon the compound in helicopters and swinging through the windows with flashbangs. The whole 9 yards. He was arrested, and since if he snitched on anyone above him, he was very bluntly a dead man, he took the rap. He was extradited to Lee in Virginia to serve a bit over 10 years. All he asked for while he was there was protein powder. He got prison ripped, and apparently beat someone near to death with a sock full of quarters for cutting in front of him at the payphone. At some point, all 4 of my uncles on both sides, plus my dad, have spent time in prison for drug-related offenses. But this particular uncle takes the cake. So, OP, how are things shaping up for you out of curiosity? I'm not saying it runs in the family or anything, but statistically, I'm just asking. Story 10. My mom set a dude on fire. When I was young, I had a babysitter named Chris. He was the uncle of 2 of my best friends. They were sisters, Abby and Becca. He was also abusive. He liked to do things to me in front of them, make them listen to my cries and screams. Nothing physical, I should mention, more psychological. Anyway, I didn't really tell anyone about it, and in fact only learned this story about 2 years ago. But it turns out my best friends did. They told my mom, and she was pissed. Soon after that, there's a party at my friend's parents' house. My mom goes and sees Chris. He's all nice to her. They're outside in the backyard. She starts kind of joking around, roughhousing, messing with him. She grabs some lighter fluid and sprays some on him. Ha ha ha, just a joke. She lights a match. Ha, you wouldn't do it, would you? And she lights him on fire. According to my mom, he was put out quickly, so he was fine. But she told him that's what it's like when you're scared for your life. And then she left. Apparently, he flew back to Florida the next day. In my time reading these Reddit stories, I've read a lot of mama bear stories. This one may be one of the best. That's intense. That's kind of badass. Maybe I shouldn't be cheering this kind of stuff on, but it's kind of cool. Story 11. Twin brothers boosted a car and robbed the 7-Eleven like half a mile from the house. Ditched car 10 houses from theirs. How were they caught? Officers respond to alarm triggered by clerk. Officer. Got an alarm here, what happened? Clerk. Tim and Tom came in and robbed the store. How do you know it was these guys? They're 6'4" twins who come in every day. I know their shape and voice. The car. 911 operator. 911, what's your emergency? Was watching TV and 2 guys parked a car in front of my house. One guy got out with like a Windex bottle and cleaned all the door handles and door areas. Then opened the door and the other guy took the stuff and cleaned the inside areas. Then they ran off up the street. Can you describe the 2 individuals? Well, it was Tim and Tom, the twins that live up the street from me. They're like 6'4" and they're twins. If you're going to commit a crime like this where there will be witnesses, perhaps just, I don't know, be more average. It just, seems like a stupid idea when you are that identifiable. That being said, the kind of people to do this probably aren't thinking it through a whole lot either. Story 12. My dad got into a bar fight around 21 or so. Hit a guy so hard that he ended him. He went to prison, of course, but while working along the road, he stopped another prisoner that attacked a guard and tried to escape. My dad was released for that. He never drank again after that, and if he got angry, he just walked out of the house to cool off. He turned 81 a week ago, and he's the nicest, easiest going guy you would ever meet. He never judges anyone. He once said to me, "We all make mistakes." Story 13. Mine is incredibly stupid, but looking back reminds me of how actually crazy the whole situation was. When I was in the 6th grade, my parents, mom plus stepdad, got married and moved me to this very small, very religious, very tight-knit community. My life changed immeasurably that year, and I absolutely hated my new school and all the people in it. So our morning routine was parents get up at 6, wake me up at 6:30, both parents are out the door by 6:45, and I catch my bus at 7:15. Well, 11-year-old me figured I could just not catch my bus. And my parents are both working demanding jobs, and they wouldn't be home until 3 hours after I usually got home, so they would never know. The first day I skipped school was easy. By week 2, I realized I would have to go back for exams, especially the state exam, which determined if you got to move to the next grade. And obviously, the school would want to know why I was absent. So I devised a plan, wherein I called the school pretending to be my mother, and told them my poor daughter had mono and would be in and out as she felt better, and I asked them to please change my contact number to my home phone. That way, I could intercept any phone calls. And thus began the 6 weeks where I went to school only ever on days that I had exams. Unbeknownst to me, one of my teachers wrote a note with my report card that were mailed to our houses. She said she was so proud of me for keeping up with schoolwork despite being sick and out of class so often. I was in 3rd period when I got called to the office to find my vice principal. Principal, 2 very, very angry parents, and a truancy officer waiting for me. I had to go to court because I missed so many days, and was given community service as a punishment. I was also sent to in-school suspension, ISS, for the remainder of the year. It's still on my criminal record, although since I was underage when it occurred, the details are sealed. But I was 100% convicted of truancy. I can only gather from this that OP was doing well in school, though. There is a part of me that's like, well, why did OP need to go then? Sounds like they didn't need to go to the classes to learn the material, so. But also the other part of me is like, yes, I know, school is very important for social development as well and all that. But come on, OP just DIY'd homeschooling. Story 14. My brother got completely inebriated one night and stupidly drove home. He woke up early in the morning to the sound of a baby crying. He looked around and noticed he didn't recognize the house. He quickly got up and walked outside to his car halfway in the driveway/street and still running. Got in his car and drove away as quickly as he could. Turns out it was some random house about 5 to 10 minutes away from our actual house. He never knew whose house it was and never got caught. He also slowed down his drinking after that. Story 15. Last year, my psychotic mother burned down my childhood home that her, my dad, my niece, my siblings, and siblings' partner lived in. All this because she believed my dad was cheating on her despite no evidence. And this was not the first time she accused my dad of cheating with no evidence. Effectively, she destroyed everything we'd built and kept in that home, along with my dad's dog and my sister's cat. Cat was burned up so never found, but the dog died of asphyxiation in my niece's room under her bed. Then, after the fire in what I can only construe as an act of desperation, she went to my bank and stole all of the money out of my accounts, because she was the secondary on the accounts. I was working on changing banks, but my new bank had yet to finalize the creation of my new account. Moral of the story is take your parents off of your bank accounts when you turn 18. She's now serving time in a county jail for the arson, because she took a plea deal and got a reduced sentence, which I still believe is utter crap. She played the poor old lady act to the judge, and he took pity on her that she did not deserve. This is the woman who eviscerated my self-esteem and made my life hell ever since I was born. She was toxic, abusive, never told me the truth about anything, and is a greedy, manipulative person. I feel no shame in saying that I do not care about her. She's lost any right to my love and respect. Story 16. When I was a dumb 6th grader, my best friend was a hardcore vegetarian. A McDonald's was up practically in the backyard of her family's condo. We snuck out and spray painted things like meat equals death on it, keeping in mind I was a happy omnivore. But then we pulled up these rocks the sizes of our heads and threw them at 2 huge 7 to 8 feet windows. Think of the windows on the front of a McDonald's that let you see the entire inside. Took a couple of attempts to get them to shatter. We snuck out a lot. There was one time around age 15 when we applied heavy makeup, wore our slag clothes, and got into a frat party. She lived walking distance to campus, and it was there we smoked pot for the first time. I always read stuff like this, and I'm like, man, my childhood was boring. What was I doing? I was just staying inside playing World of Warcraft from the age of 8. Kept me out of trouble, I guess. Because, man, that is some serious property damage. And also going to a frat party at the age of 15 just seems like a bad idea. Especially as girls. That just seems like a recipe for disaster. I'm assuming nothing bad happened because OP didn't say, but still seems really, really risky. That being said, crazy stories, great to read, and really makes me wonder what happened to my childhood. Anyway, existentialism aside, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.